I have resisted process my whole life, actually. And it's mainly because when I looked at process for most B2B marketing companies, it was a process based on activities. What are we doing? What are we accomplishing? How many things did we get done this quarter to reach our growth goals? And when we talk process here at Elevate, at least, we're not talking a process in terms of a list of activities. We're talking about every B2B marketing team needs a process that's focused on how are we going to generate new ideas? How are we going to test those ideas? And how are we going to learn from those ideas? Because right now, think about some of the questions that you could ask as a marketing leader. How do you know your team right now is working on the most impactful areas? What's determining that? How does your team decide on what to work on? Should they be spending their energy creating new ads to improve click-through rate, or should they be spending their energy on creating more content? How do you make those decisions? I think lastly, when you think about process and learnings is what exactly have you learned that's actually helping you now? When you think about what most B2B companies are learning about with their marketing, it's, well, we ran these two ads and, well, we have found that an ad with people in it does better than an ad with a product screenshot, right? And those learnings are going to drive exponential growth for us because we're going to keep getting better. But most of the time, that's not what happens because those learnings aren't impactful. We need impactful learnings on the biggest opportunity for growth. And the other reason this process thing is so important and a critical part of how we work at Elevate is you have to realize as a marketing leader that what works for you is not going to work for others. And I think for the longest time, we have sat there and take prescriptions from people who sounds like a great idea. I need to go do this demand generation thing. And I got this idea on LinkedIn. We're going to try that. And we're going to create X content because I realize it's working for somebody else. But the reality is your audience is different. Your product is different. Your life cycle is different. Everything about your company and circumstances are different. So I want to break down the 5 steps that we actually go through a process to help your marketing team, 1, identify and find a sustainable marketing program. But number 2, make sure they focus on impact and learnings with their marketing. So number 1, the foundational piece here that we've talked about, so I won't go too in depth, is you have to have a growth hypothesis. You have to have an understanding on where the opportunity is for your marketing team to drive sustainable and compounding growth. Otherwise, you don't have the ability to create and run experiments and ideas around the biggest focal opportunity for the company. So when you think about sustainable growth and before you start executing on a process, the company themselves has to identify where do we think sustainable growth is going to come from over the next 18 months. Once that opportunity has been identified, you can actually work within your marketing team on a process to capture learnings against that opportunity. So what we do and how we work together is number 1, it's about focus. So we work in a 30 to 90 day sprint window. We actually leverage an OKR framework. Number 1 is we zoom out before we start and we think about, okay, where should we focus on next? Your marketing team has 3 opportunities every sprint on where they're going to focus. Should you optimize a growth hypothesis? As in, do you have a growth hypothesis now that you're going to add friction to try to get more out of it? Should you expand a growth hypothesis? Should you go out and potentially leverage new channels within an existing growth hypothesis? Should you go and create more content or actually spend more dollars? Or how can you expand that growth hypothesis? Should you add additional activities and things like that? Or are you exploring a new growth hypothesis? So is this a new opportunity that we haven't tested and validated before? So when you think about bringing focus, we take the growth hypothesis and we zoom out and we figure out in our 30 to 90 day sprint, okay, where are we going to focus? Are we going to optimize, expand, or explore a new opportunity? From there, you actually build a list of ideas actually. So we run everything in an Asana board. We will brainstorm ideas as your growth team against either optimizing, expanding, or exploring. As we build out those lists of ideas, we actually come up with a hypothesis for each one, right? So we are doing X because we believe Y is going to happen. That is critical to making sure that you compile learnings in a systematic way and you have a valid reason for doing what you're doing. And you want to be able to measure your growth hypothesis. We then come up with the main metrics we're trying to move within that idea. Maybe it is ad click-through rate. Maybe it's inbound volume. Maybe we're trying to get more buyers to our aha moments or our core value. But we want to understand how we're going to measure that idea. And then the last thing we do when building our list of ideas is we actually rank them accordingly. So we use what we call an ICE score, which is impact, confidence, and ease. And we rank each one 1 to 10. What's the likely impact if this experiment is successful? How confident are we on a 1 to 10 scale that we are going to get to our hypothesis? And how easy is this experiment for us to run? Then we can actually not only build a list of ideas, but we can then actually rank those ideas based on their ICE score so that we focus on the most impactful opportunities that we're most confident in and has the most likely to get the intended result that we want. From there, as you prioritize your ideas, you actually start running the experiments, right? So within how we work is we do a time frame for how long we think the experiment's going to run. We let that experiment run. We do all of this in Asana board, and then we actually compile our learnings. So our learnings then move into one, did this experiment meet the hypothesis that we set out? Yes or no? We actually really easily measure that because we want to know how many experiments did we run the last growth sprint maybe. How many of those experiments were successful, right? So you do want to capture within every experiment, were you successful? What were the main metrics that moved, right? If you're moving inbound volume, did that move up? Did it move down? By how much did it move? We compile all the data points and then we compile any additional learnings within our Asana board. So what else did we learn from this experiment? Are there other aha moments that we want to know about or that are useful? Are there new experiences as well that we should potentially run based on these learnings? As we compile those learnings, we then report and improve. So going back to how many experiments did we run, right? How many of those experiments were successful? Because if you buy into this idea that growth is a game of learnings, how can I learn faster than the competition? If you're measuring your experiments, you can actually ensure then, well, how can we run more experiments? What changes should we make to our process so that we can run more experiments? How do we make or impact the success rate of our experiments? So you actually don't just report on your learnings and then coming up with new ideas. You actually report and improve your process continuously so that you can make it run more fluid. The growth process, in essence, in my opinion, is your entire growth engine. It is how your marketing team will come up with ideas against your main growth opportunity, how you will test ideas, and how you will learn from those ideas, how you will feed those learnings and tactics back into your system so that you can come up with new growth ideas to keep the process going on your journey to sustainable marketing programs.